What's one suitable not-for-work confession you'd only make anonymously? Story 1. When I was 7, I faced the ultimate childhood challenge. A long walk home, a desperately full bladder, and absolutely no way I was going to make it. I was with my sisters, but my pride wouldn't allow me to admit my predicament. Then, as if the universe was looking out for me or my bladder, the skies opened up and rain came down in sheets. Seizing the opportunity, I relieved myself right there. By the time we got home, we were all soaking wet and immediately jumped into the shower. No one ever caught on. I walked away a relieved kid, and possibly a rain enthusiast. Story 2. Someone entered my friend's house back in high school and took all of his gaming equipment. The person knew where everything was, even the items put into drawers and such. About a month later, a guy we were all familiar with was boasting about all his new gaming equipment. Most of the things on his list matched what was taken. Not a coincidence. He lived right down the road from my house. My best friend and I observed his house, spending time in the neighborhood with other friends, watching and timing when they'd leave their house. Eventually, we entered through his bedroom window that he leaves unlocked. We took everything from his gaming collection, even items that weren't originally taken. We gave it all back to our friend he took it from, and we sold the rest and used the money to fund a party at my place. The person knew someone was aware of his involvement. He and his mom, who I felt bad for, ended up moving at the end of the year. She was sweet and kind to us. The thought of her son's room being entered must have worried her. She never knew what happened. Story 3. I was on Omegle back in its early days, and this guy was, well, very enthusiastically occupied. I asked him if he was single. He said no. I said, "Where's your partner to help you out with this?" He said his wife was in the other room. So I asked, "Why don't you get her to come help you?" He was hesitant at first, but he did. He asked his wife. His wife came into the camera's view and began assisting him. I, at 16 years old, facilitated the couple's intimate moment on camera, and it's something I'm oddly proud of, but have never told anyone because then I'd be labeled as an Omegle enthusiast to my friends. Story 4. Some years ago, I was intimate in the back of my old car. Afterwards, as a gentleman should, I showed her some aftercare. Unfortunately, there was an unexpected spill, which ended up on my backseat cloth seats, so I spent the rest of the night thoroughly cleaning it. Upholstery shampoo, air freshener, etc. A couple of months later, I bought a new car and gave my old one to my little brother, who was entering his senior year of high school. Everything seemed fine, but on especially hot days, the scent deep in the cushions of the back seats would start to reappear. So one day my brother called me and was like, "Yo, what's that scent in the Civic? It smells familiar, but I can't quite place it." To which I only said, "I bet it does smell familiar." Taking that one to my grave. Not because I care whether or not my little brother knows what he's smelling is a residual. Well, let's just say a stubborn stain, but because he sometimes picks up our mom, who sits in the back seat. Story 5. Took a girl back to my dorm room on my first night of university, only to projectile vomit, while she was giving me head because I'd drunk an entire pitcher of Long Island iced tea 45 minutes prior. She was super chill about it though. Never managed to enjoy head since. Story 6. Picture this. Me taking a moment in a small storage room at work. You know, the one with all the cleaning supplies and the slightly humming equipment. I've been feeling a bit uncomfortable all morning, and finally, I needed a quick break. A moment of, let's call it, internal settling occurred. It was a noticeable sound, and it had a distinct, though fleeting aroma. Now, it seems the acoustics in that room carried the sound quite well, and the air quality. It drifted out towards the main office where Brenda, bless her heart, was busy with her tasks. Brenda, who has a keen sense of smell and a tendency towards expressive reactions. She took a breath, and her eyes widened slightly. Something unusual. She exclaimed, her voice conveying concern. "We might need to check something out." Before anyone could ask, "Brenda, are you sure it's not just the ventilation?" She was making a call to facilities. Next thing I know, a maintenance crew was on their way, checking around the building for any unusual occurrences. I'm back at my workstation, focusing on my tasks, while trying my best not to smile. It was a minor situation, all due to my brief moment of needing some personal space. Story 7. Alright, you want a real story? Well, here you go. I'd spent the weekend with my girlfriend, and my digestive system was rebelling. I absolutely had to use the bathroom. She'd stepped out to go to the kitchen, and I dashed to her small master bath and, well, took care of business. The toilet clogged. Oh my goodness, no, you gotta be kidding me. So I grabbed what I thought was the plunger in a desperate attempt to salvage some of my dignity. except it wasn't working. What was going on? I pulled it out, and it wasn't a plunger. It was a toilet brush, and now it was completely covered in a mess. I didn't know how to handle this situation, so I put it back, quickly got dressed, and said I had to rush to work. Then I made a hasty exit and never looked back. This was before cell phones, and she left dozens of furious messages on my voicemail that I did not listen to. Nope, just unplugged the phone like a responsible adult and never spoke with her again. It's been decades, and it still makes me cringe how that all went down. Story 8. Summer heat was a killer, and I was stuck doing grunt work for Mr. Henderson, this ancient dude with a wallet glued shut. I'm talking sweat-soaked shirts, blisters, the works, all for the promise of a few bucks. You'd always find some excuse, next week, kid, or times are tough, the kind of lines that make you want to scream. I was young, dumb, and seriously pissed. One afternoon, he took off for some doctor's appointment, and I saw my chance. A loose window, a quick shimmy, and I was in. His house smelled like mothballs and old paper. I found his coin collection, a bunch of dusty glass jars filled with loose change, tucked away in a musty cupboard. I emptied them into a backpack, a small act of revenge, I told myself. 2 days later, the ambulance wailed down the street. Turns out Mr. Henderson had passed in his sleep. The whole thing felt surreal, like some twisted movie. And the change? Well, it just vanished, another forgotten detail in a quiet, suburban death. Story 9. Tried to create content for a subscription platform. It's not as easy as one might think, especially if you're trying to maintain anonymity. To really generate income quickly, there needs to be a pre-existing demand from people wanting to see you, and not just any random person. Say what you want about the whole thing, but there's a reason Sophie Rain makes what she makes, and not some other equally attractive person. There are plenty of visually appealing people out there, even though she is very attractive. There's a following for her, and for her specifically. The most effective way to generate immediate income on these platforms is to promote it to an existing audience, rather than trying to build one from scratch. You just have to be prepared for everyone you know to have the potential to see what you post. Story 10. When I was working out a lot, I was consuming a significant amount of protein. I was at a party at my girlfriend's place and had to get something from under the sink when I experienced a rather sudden release of gas. It came from the deepest, most unholy depths of my digestive system, and I have never before or since smelled anything that unpleasant that was still, technically, within the realm of organic matter. People almost immediately noticed, and I ended up helping 2 older guys investigate the possible sewage leak, which we, regrettably, were unable to locate. Story 11. I had a very close connection with the person I had just met. She had faced a lot of hardship in her life and had experienced a difficult early adulthood, including making a tough decision regarding a child. One evening, when we were alone together, we shared a moment of deep emotional intimacy, but we kept things platonic. She became emotional and shared that no one had ever shown her such genuine kindness and care. I didn't fully grasp the depth of her feelings at the time, but we comforted each other and continued talking. Nothing further happened, and a year later, she was tragically involved in an accident. I feel a sense of sadness about what she went through, but I also hope that our connection offered her a brief moment of solace. We shared a dance at a mutual friends gathering before I left, and I'll always remember her genuine smile that evening. Story 12. In high school, there was a girl who often expressed thoughts of self-harm. She had previous interactions with law enforcement due to past attempts, and they were beginning to view her situation with less urgency. Knowing this and understanding the limitations of relying on authorities, I felt compelled to act. I was aware of her method. She used a razor to inflict harm. I knew she had some interest in me, so I arranged to visit her at her house, and we went to her room. My intention was to discreetly locate her razor while alone, but she remained with me. During our time together, we engaged in intimate activity. While she was occupied, I had a sudden thought that she might have concealed her razor blade in the lip of the upper bunk bed. I reached up and found it. Thankfully, I avoided injury. I quickly concealed it in my pocket, and to avoid raising suspicion, I continued our intimate encounter. My motivation was solely to ensure she didn't realize I found the razor. Afterward, I excused myself to the bathroom and disposed of the razor blade. A few days later, she texted me, expressing thoughts of self-harm, but also mentioned she couldn't find a razor. I used the time it took for her to search to engage in conversation and dissuade her from her intentions. Story 13. I have a strong interest in observing people. It's not meant to be intrusive, I promise. More like I'm genuinely curious about how people communicate, especially when they think they're unobserved. For instance, I might sit in a coffee shop and watch pairs or groups of friends, trying to understand their relationships. Or I'll watch people in the park imagining their lives. But it's not just everyday interactions that capture my attention. I'm also drawn to significant moments, like when people are having a heated discussion, or a deeply engaging conversation, or those instances when there's a real sense of connection. I've even on occasion followed people just to see where they go, what their routines are. I know it might sound unusual, perhaps even a bit odd, but I can't help it. It's as if I'm trying to understand something about human interaction, or maybe just people in general. I've never done anything that could be considered harmful or overly personal, but I recognize it's not a typical interest. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure I want to change it. Story 14. Over the years, I've received numerous compliments on my feet from various people, both men and women of different orientations. I've always enjoyed being barefoot and taking good care of my feet, and it seems people notice. One day, out of boredom, I decided to create an experimental Instagram page dedicated to my feet. I didn't have high expectations, but thought it would be amusing if I gained a small following. Before the page was removed, I had almost 3,000 followers, primarily men, but also some women. The messages I received were mostly expressions of gratitude for sharing my feet. People treated me with an almost reverential respect, which was quite surprising. During the page's existence, I received numerous requests for personalized photos and earned close to $1,000 simply by sending pictures of my feet. I never revealed my face or tattoos, and I never shared personal information, despite some persistent requests. They were solely interested in foot pictures and were willing to pay for them. I never anticipated such a response. The page was recently removed from Instagram, even though I never posted anything remotely inappropriate. I'll admit I was disappointed. I had built up a considerable number of posts and had developed a connection with some of my followers. The page also boosted my self-confidence. While the compliments were specifically about my feet, they were still compliments. I've considered starting a subscription-based platform multiple times, but have always hesitated. Perhaps someday. Story 15. I have this thing. I like to create scenarios, not like fantasies or anything like that. More like elaborate, detailed, imaginary situations. I'll be walking down the street, and I'll start to imagine that everyone around me is part of some secret society, or that the buildings are actually giant robots in disguise. Or I'll be in a meeting, and I'll start to imagine that everyone is a character in a spy movie, and I'm the secret agent trying to uncover their plot. I know it sounds crazy, but it's actually really fun. It's like I'm living in my own personal movie all the time. I've even started writing down some of the scenarios, like short stories or screenplays. I'm not sure if anyone else would find them interesting, but I think they're pretty cool. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to stop imagining. Story 16. When I was 18, my best friend and I made a regrettable decision to try and engage with a Mormon missionary. It resulted in him being sent home from his mission, and I've carried a heavy feeling of remorse about it ever since. My friend recently found him on social media, and he's now married with a lovely family. I sincerely hope he didn't experience lasting negative consequences from that incident. Story 17. At 19, I had a relationship with a married woman 20 years my senior while working at a ranch. Her husband became physically aggressive with a farmhand, believing the farmhand had been intimate with his wife. He was completely unaware that the person involved was me, the quiet guy who always wore a Captain America shirt. Story 18. While incarcerated in a minimum security facility, I worked in the automotive shop. We regularly traveled to town to acquire supplies. The route to town passed by my residence. I eventually persuaded the corrections officer to allow me a brief stop at my house to spend time with my wife. Story 19. There was a resident in our neighborhood who was a source of frustration. He consistently kept our football when it went into his fenced yard. Then we found it the next day damaged. We decided to retaliate. Of all the things we did, the incident with the rotten eggs on his car stands out. It caused significant paint damage. He was away for the weekend. The following Monday, the police arrived, and there was a loud disturbance. We were never identified as being responsible. Story 20. Look, I'm not proud of this, but I have a collection. Not of anything illegal or anything that would hurt anyone. Just things. Things that people leave behind. Things that tell a story. Like a worn-out ticket stub from a concert or a faded photograph or a handwritten note. I find them in public places on the street and parks, anywhere people go. I keep them in a box, And sometimes I'll take them out and look at them and try to imagine the lives of the people who own them. It's like I'm piecing together a puzzle of other people's experiences. I know it's a little odd, but it's not hurting anyone. It's just a way for me to feel connected, I guess. To feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to change.
That's a wrap for this video. Make sure to leave your relatable story down in the comments. I would love to make a video on them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.